Okay, so tonight I thought we would be able to meet on YouTube, but apparently they won't let me go live yet. They need 24 hours after verification of my account before they will let me go live. I don't know why, but okay. So this leaves us back on Facebook for this evening, but hopefully it will not be too big of an issue. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. It seems like I have been still having some issues with Facebook. All right. So sorry for the confusion. We will definitely be meeting on YouTube next week. So I hope I haven't caused too much confusion. But we will get it all set up, I promise. And then we will be off and to the races on YouTube. And I'm very excited about the AESA account on and the AESA having its own YouTube channel. And I am really looking forward to not only having our live sessions on YouTube, but also I'm looking forward to being able to, I don't know, like maybe making some little short videos that sort of address specific issues of questions that often come up. Let's see. I am writing here about YouTube will have to wait for next week. Facebook Live for tonight. Okay. Yeah, I have been having issues with Facebook again. So I don't know if anybody else has had any issues. I've been running into problems with having, like being able to do approvals. So if you have invited somebody recently to the group, I'm very sorry if they have not gotten in. I am working as hard as I can to rectify that, but I can't guarantee anything since it's acting up again. But this again speaks to why I want to, have us move essentially off of Facebook and onto other platforms. So this way we're not just stuck at the whims of Facebook itself. So again, something to consider. Tonight we are here, but next week we will be on YouTube. Yay! YouTube will be great. I am looking forward for any kind of information or any kind of, I don't know, like questions you would like answered. I would love to be able to do that in these short videos that I'm going to produce and have on YouTube. Let me think. What else is there? There's so much going on right now. I'm very excited about what all is going on. I did post in the group. I was able to do a talk this morning about homeschooling special needs children, and it was a lot of fun. And if you haven't had a chance to see it, and if you were ever considering homeschooling your special needs child, I highly recommend you watch. Also, if you have ever any questions concerning really pretty much anything, any educational setting for your child, I would be very happy to discuss that with you and address those issues. I know we were talking in the group this evening about various different states and what are their school voucher programs. Hi, honey, and hi, Elise. How are you? And the school voucher programs, I think, are really great. That's essentially what I use in the state of Arizona. It's called Arizona Exception. It is called Empowerment Scholarship Account, ESA. And the ESA account, I believe, is just fabulous. It is modeled after the program that is it's used in the District of Washington, D.C. And essentially what happens is your child's primary eligibility is what determines, so Lisa said stressed, but good. Oh no, I hope you're not too stressed. Now's a good time, right? Like grab a shot of something or maybe a glass of wine and sit here and listen to me, and then please let me know what else is going on with you. I am doing well, and thank you. Like I said, I've just been really busy. Technically, my expense reports for ESA are due today and this evening. Hi, Julia. Hi, Julia. How are you? So I'm supposed to be doing my expense reports. They're not going to get done on time. I'm very bad, but I have, I think, good reason. I've been extremely busy with not only AESA and speaking engagements. Not only did I speak this morning on homeschooling children with special needs, But I also will be speaking locally at an autism parent support group on April 2nd, talking about autism in the educational setting and what you can do to help advocate for your child who has autism. So I'm really excited and looking forward to the opportunity, and basically a chance and a way to reach out to parents of special needs children who are in the West Valley of Phoenix, where more or less I reside. So does anyone have any questions this evening that they specifically want me to address? We have had a few interesting things happen in the group this week. Like one of them was Sarah. Sarah had posted several, see, Terry was saying, where's the YouTube feed? All right, I want to let her know so that way she's not lost, right? We don't want to lose anybody. Sorry for the confusion. But like I said, YouTube unfortunately says I have to wait 24 hours after verifying my account to use YouTube Live. So it won't work well for our setting because I really want to spend this time. I mean, the whole purpose of this time is for me to answer your questions. I want to answer whatever it is that is on your mind that you may not have wanted to ask in the group, or you wanted me to basically just kind of expound upon something that happened in the group. Hi, Jenny. Hi, welcome. So again, next week, YouTube, I plan to have it up and running, I promise. Because yeah, Facebook is tiring me lately with all the technical issues and glitches that we've been having. Also, so again, several things I have going on. So homeschooling speaking engagement, that was a lot of fun this morning. We have, hi Jenny, we have, hi Jackie, yay, Jackie joined us. Jackie is one of our fellow admins in the group. She is an awesome parent advocate. And so if you ever have any questions and you happen to see that Jackie is on, by all means, ask Jackie. She is very knowledgeable, and I am very lucky that she helps me admin our group. So we've been really busy. As I said, we have, I'll be speaking to a group of parents concerning autism and autism in the educational setting. And my husband's been great. He's been helping me put not like a PowerPoint and an outline together. Thank you, honey. And part of that is because I have been pressed on time. I've got a lot going on. We are working on our nonprofit, which is Arizona Exceptional Students Association. But don't let the name fool you, though we are Arizona Exceptional Students Association. I help people from everywhere. Yes, see, Jackie said, hi, everyone. Yes, like I said, take a moment and say hi to Jackie. Jackie gives very knowledgeable advice. So the Arizona Exceptional Students Association, like I said, don't let the name fool you. Though it says Arizona, I help everybody from coast to coast, all over everywhere. And we are looking potentially to change the name because when I created the nonprofit, as my husband said, I wasn't thinking big enough. He was right. Doesn't happen often. So, honey, now it's been recorded, okay? So you have this for future use. I'll admit, you were correct. That hurt. Okay, so anyways, yeah, I wasn't thinking, fully, and it really makes more sense to change our name to American Exceptional Students Association because the scale of the group that I have, it's American. I help people literally from all over, and even including Canada and England and elsewhere. So expect some changes coming soon. One of the things that I'm really excited about coming up is AESA's new website. So we will be rolling that out, and it will be rolling out on, let's see, April 1st, I'm hoping, right? And hopefully it will not be an April Fool's joke. Hopefully the site will be up and it'll be running and it'll run the way I want it to. So we'll see how things work out. But I'm really excited, and the lady that I have working for me who's making the site, she is a fellow mom who has special needs children. So I'm really excited to be able to help support another fellow mom in her business venture. So let's see, I have a few comments here. So Elise is saying, You've told me already that they can do OT consults. So I requested that for his shoe tying. And yes, that is an OT skill. So she talked to me, so talked to the counselor at the school, and she said, oh, I guess I need to talk to the OT. Yes, you would need to talk to the OT and see about having that added in, because it is an OT goal. Any kind of self-care, self-dressing, potty training, executive functioning skills, those all fall under OT. Matter of fact, if you just had to randomly guess a person, a therapist who would be doing something, if it's not speech related and it's not like big body movement related, you know, like running or jumping, then probably the OT does it. And they really do, they work on so many skills. So any kind of buttoning, zipper, tying a shoe, brushing your hair, brushing your teeth, those are all things that an OT can work on. Pamela said, good evening from Gilbert, Arizona. Hi, Pamela. So Phoenix here, and I'm glad that you can join us. I was just talking about how AESA's site will be up, our new site will be up and running hopefully on April 1st, and I hope that you guys can join. I have moved the site to like a membership site, and yes, you can join for free, so do not worry. But we will have our own forums on that site, and for those will require like a membership fee, so it's very minor fee, I think, because it's less than $10 a month. And if I can get people to kind of help and support AESA at that capacity, it allows me and essentially frees me to be able to spend more time to do advocacy in a big way, along with essentially helping to fund our Reed Scholarship. So the Reed Scholarship, I'm really excited because it is a scholarship that we're going to give to parents. It's essentially a grant because it's a sum of money that will be paid to parents, with the idea being that parents can then use that money and take school districts to due process. They're going to pay an attorney to help them take their case to due process. And we have already contacted local attorneys to us in Arizona, and the attorneys are really excited about this program. So one of the things I wanted to mention, because it was brought up in the group, was there was a lot of people who were talking, because I had the question, right, about how much did you pay for an advocate? Did you retain an advocate, and then how much did you pay the advocate? So for an advocate, I would say kind of, you know, the average, if you were going to pay for one, the average price ran about $80 to $100. And I would say that's about right. Like from what I was hearing, because I also called a lot of advocates locally. I know I'm terrible, right? I called a lot of them locally, and I was like, hey, how much do you charge for advocacy help? I'm really just wanting to know. So I found out a lot of them charge anywhere between $80 to $150 an hour on average. And then there were one of them that charged $250 an hour. It's like, wow. So hopefully they're really good. I don't really know, but that's a lot of money, and that's to the level, I would think, you know, price-wise, of an attorney. So I was a little surprised by how much she charged. Anyways, so the idea is that I want to be able to help people and empower them to do the things that they're needing to do, whether it's learning and understanding advocacy better, or if it is needing to take the school to due process. Because again, these parent training centers and getting the grant. So a parent training center, and I don't know if you know this, so if you get a free advocate, they normally come from a parent training center. And the idea behind the Parent Training Center, it's funded by the U.S. Department of Education. And so what the U.S. Department of Education is wanting you to do is they're wanting you to kind of, well, to divert you essentially from due process. They're wanting, and they train their staff to train people, the advocates that you get for free, to not take your case to due process. They train them to take you to mediation or some kind of arbitration, but not due process. because in order to retain their grant as a parent training center, so many of their cases, like there's a percentage of them, and the percentage was quite high, that they needed to have a resolution to that case that did not involve due process. And I had somebody approach me recently about AESA, and if I was ever considering about becoming like a parent training center or something like that, applying for these grants from the U.S. Department of Education. And I was like, you know, I like the way you think. They're great grants. It's a lot of money. And you know, there's a lot required in order to apply for these grants from the federal government, right? So no, it's way beyond my skill level, especially for right now while I don't have a grant writer. But something though to think about is, I was like, you know, it's really kind of the opposite direction that I'm going. I want parents to take the schools to due process. When the school is not doing the job that they are supposed to be doing, I want them to take them to due process. The idea is, if you take a school to due process, right, then it's kind of forcing the school to address their deficiencies. Now, if you go to mediation or arbitration, really they don't tend to necessarily address their deficiencies. What they do is they just move your child and take care of your child. So that's great, and it's great for your child. And I, by no means, please don't take this the wrong way, I completely condone everything that you're doing, because in the end, what you really need to care about is your child, right? So I don't begrudge anybody doing that, but that leaves so many, right? Others who have no idea what's going on. So one of the best ways to kind of push schools into doing the things that they're supposed to do is to take them to due process. And I want to be able to enable parents to do that. So we're looking at handing out these grants essentially for $3,000 to pay as a retainer to a special education attorney in order to take your case to due process. So I'm really excited, because that should be one aspect that we'll have up and running on our new website. So I wanted to let you know that's what's going on. I'm very excited about a lot of stuff that I have going on. Let's see. So Elise also says, this is tying back to the OT and the shoe tying, right? She goes, I need a link again on showing them that they're required to help them with that. I can help you with that. I'll put that link in a little bit later. Let's see. So we talked about Pamela. And Elise also said, well, he's on a 504, so they won't give the service. Oh, so that's what you need. All right. So I posted several times in the group. And I think if you look at if you search the group, hashtag section 504, you will find that it's the parent and educator guide, or educator and parent guide to section 504, and it's written by the Office of Civil Rights. So I know I've dropped that link, I don't know how many times into the group. You probably can turn it up if you just look for it. If not, I'll post it again, because it's very easy for me to do. And I don't mind at all doing that for you. But in there, it does tell you that, yes, under a 504, you absolutely can have services. Now, not necessarily goals, because technically goals should be in an IEP, because that's the thing, right? Like a 504, there's no requirement to come back and revisit the 504. It's not like the IEP in the law, where it tells you in the law you must come back once a year and revisit the document. 504 doesn't have that protection. So there really shouldn't be any goals in a 504, but it doesn't mean that you can't have services. And you can absolutely add that into a 504. I mean, it's such a minor thing. I don't see, you just make sure that he can do all the things that he needs to do. They're really fine motor skills is what you're looking at. To have the manual dexterity in order to tie your shoes, to button your shirt, and to zip your pants. Also, zipping your pants is not just the pincher, but it's also hand strength. You need good strength here to grip the zipper and to pull. So that's kind of another little aspect to that part. Let's see. And I can help you find that page, by the way, if you need any help. And just so you know, so one of my little tricks, okay, so I was talking to someone tonight, and we were kind of discussing, so what does it take to learn to do what I do? I do want to kind of work on that and set up something and set up some kind of training to help people learn to do what it is that I do. What I do is different from any other advocate that I know of, because I look at things from this, medical perspective. But one of my little tricks is when I'm looking through documents and I'm trying to sift through information, I try to look for keywords. Keywords are a huge thing. There are a lot of unique keywords and jargon that are related specifically to special education. Those are great keywords to put into Google to try to narrow it down to the specific things that you're needing to look at. I will, and I have before, spent hours on end sitting there going through links looking for information. When I find things, I bookmark them. Okay, so I use Google Chrome, and I have a bookmark bar across the top of my screen. In that bookmark bar, I have literally a folder that says IEP. In that IEP folder, I have all of my other stuff, broken down into subfolders. And that's how I find information. And and I say that's how I store information. I actually find information, I just Google it. But I like having these links so that in case somebody asks a question, I have already found that information. I've taken that link, I've stored it into my IEP folder, and that way I can give that information to somebody else. So when you go and you click on a document and you get these documents, sometimes that are over 100 pages long. Normally, I used to read stuff like that all the time because I did environmental work and we did very technical documents. And it's not uncommon for an environmental plan to wind up, they can be 1,000 pages from front to back. And there's no way that I want to sit there and read 1,000 pages to look for the information that I'm looking for. So when you're on the page where you were at, you click on the page and then you hit Control F. So for those of you who are Mac users, I don't know, you're on your own, but it's whatever the equivalent is of Control for an IBM on the Mac. And if you do Control F, it opens up a find window, and then you can type in your keyword. And from there, I just quickly scan through and determine what it is that I'm looking for. So just something to think about if you are ever needing to do a search and you're trying to find information. It's one way in which I can sift through a whole lot of information really very quickly. So Melissa, hi, how are you? Melissa said, my son currently has an IEP with the coding of emotional disability. So it's not coding, so just so you know. What the school, technically what it's called, is an eligibility. It's an eligibility category as listed under IDEA and in your state. So IDEA has one definition of emotional disability, and then your state may have further refined the definition of emotional disability. But it's an eligibility category for special education. And she said his current diagnoses are, so I'm assuming you mean medical, and that's different from educational. And I know that I've talked a few times about that, but it's a little tricky. But anyway, she was saying that they are social pragmatic communication disorder. By the way, I really despise that medical diagnosis because, in my opinion, often those children really have high functioning autism. And so I don't know if that's something that you've ever considered, but usually they have high functioning autism. And the only reason they aren't eligible for their autism diagnosis is because they are considered having too much eye contact, or they are too social. Not saying they're socially appropriate, they're just too social. So just so you know, it's important to look at the DSM-5 definition of what autism is, and there is zero that says if a child makes too much eye contact or if it's too social, then therefore they are not autistic. No, it doesn't say that at all. What it says is improper social communication. I know my son James, no social filter. He literally said it went here and it came right out of his mouth. There was nothing stopping it. And he caused me quite a bit of embarrassment. Thankfully, back when I was looking to get him diagnosed with autism, this social pragmatic communication disorder wasn't available to diagnose him with. because he probably would have been considered to have social pragmatic communication disorder. But really, it's autism. And you can see that. And there are some very subtle signs that he has that, you know, kind of point to his autism. But you really have to look closely. And a lot of times these diagnosticians don't spend enough time with your child, because I really should spend at least 3 hours of kind of just watching your child and working with them and running them through these psychological tests. So you may just want to continue kind of working as you can to see if he, you know, kind of starts to rise to meet this threshold of autism. Because if he was considered medically eligible for autism, then that sort of opens a door for you to get more services for him. You know, like from your state and state Medicaid. A lot of states have laws that, you know, force insurance providers to cover services for autism. So these are all just kind of things to think about, because you also go on to say, besides his social pragmatic communication disorder, he has anxiety, which is general social and separation anxiety, and ADHD. The anxiety and the ADHD tend to be what's considered co-occurring conditions with autism. And so if you had that autism diagnosis, right, it would make sense. It would encompass his social pragmatic communication disorder, his anxiety, his ADHD, and then my guess would probably be, though you did not mention it, that he probably has sensory issues. And if you haven't really kind of investigated that, you might want to look into it. Anxiety and sensory issues are kind of known to go hand in hand also. And it's not uncommon for children with ADHD to have sensory issues. So again, just all sorts, you know, like things to think about, right? But she said that his psychiatrist suggested that I push for OHI as his eligibility instead, because it may not limit his placement options. Now, I will agree with your psychologist on this. Having emotional disability can limit placement. Now, that being said, right, the directive of the school is, I mean, like by law, the directive of the school is that you are to have and educate a child in the least restrictive environment. Doesn't matter what their eligibility category is. All children should be, you know, educated in what is the least restrictive environment. So if your child is considered emotionally an emotional disability, that should not automatically, I mean, unless it's very behavioral, right? Like, you know, like very strong behavioral outbursts and throwing desks or something like that, then maybe I could see, you know, why you would have a difficult time educating him in the general education setting. But unless there's sort of these explosive outbursts, then it makes no sense why you would limit his educational settings. So, and again, we can talk more about this as we go on. But she said he is currently in a regional behavior program. And I don't know if that's really an appropriate program for him. And it's kind of what I was just talking about, right? And so, sorry, I'm sitting here trying to read some of the other comments too. So it may not be the appropriate setting for him. And if that's the case, then I highly urge you to see about calling an IEP meeting and then having this discussion with them about least restrictive environment and how, you know, if he's moved off, right, into this separate school, then that is a very restrictive environment. And so, you know, and then they should have a plan too, right, to bring him back to his home school. And I don't know if that's in place. So that's something too you probably want to investigate. Let's see. So then she was asking what's my opinion on his coding or eligibility. OHI would be good. You have to go back and look, right, at what, because you could do OHI for ADHD, and often ADHD, if you're given an IEP for ADHD, it is classified under OHI. But his anxiety and his social pragmatic communication disorder, I don't know. I'm thinking he may potentially meet the educational threshold for autism, right? It depends on your state. So again, something to think about. you may want to see about getting that autism diagnosis educationally speaking, and I think potentially he could reach that threshold. And that could open doors too on the school side. It really shouldn't, right? Because it really shouldn't matter technically what your child's eligibility is for special education. What's important is the child receiving FAPE? Is the child receiving a free and appropriate public education? That is the important question. And case law has shown that that is what the courts care about. They don't care about what your eligibility is. It could be anything. It could be nothing. But what they care about is the child receiving a free and appropriate public education? And if he's not, that's the problem. So these are all kind of things to think about and consider. And we can talk about it more in the group too, where you can sit there and, type things and I can type back. And then I'm not trying to like look and balance and do a bunch of stuff. But again, things to think about. So Tammy asked, how do I find an advocate? Good question. And I can't really help you. So in the group rules and the announcement post, and I tell a lot of people this, Tammy, so like don't feel singled out. The whole purpose of why I founded this group is because I want to put myself out of a job. I mean, like ideally, that's what I would like to do. Ideally, I would like to train all parents how to be the best advocate that they can be for their child, and then send you forth to go and help, not only advocate for your child, but hopefully somebody else, right? If I could teach the 5,000 people that are in my group, if I could teach you all how to be very effective advocates for your child, and then you went out and you advocated or helped another parent advocate for their child, and then they did the same and they did the same, how much stronger would we be, right? So my goal in this group is to educate parents, and I don't recommend advocates. Part of the problem too is there are so many. There is no national program for advocates. Anyone can claim that they are an advocate. When somebody tells you that they are an advocate, you should be somewhat skeptical until you have a chance to get to know them and find out what is their level of knowledge. And often for parents, the problem is you can't gauge that because you don't have enough experience yourself to even know what is knowledgeable. So it's difficult for me to recommend advocates because I've had people have some very bad experiences, and I don't do that in the group. Now, what I do, and in the group rules, I do tell you, you can go to COPA, which is COPAA, and I'm thinking it's .com, but I'm not sure. But it's like the Council of Parent Attorneys and Advocates, I believe is what it stands for. And I have the link in the announcement post under the group rules, and it's group rule number 3. Say, I go over this so often I know which one it is. But in that, I list in there COPA as a potential place to go look, because those who are listed in COPA theoretically, hopefully, know what they're doing. And then I also list Rights Law. So Rights Law has a Rights Law yellow pages, and they have kind of a directory listing for advocates to go in and to list themselves in every state. And I think it's a great resource. So I do list those as 2 potential places to go find an advocate. Another third place that I really didn't mention in the announcement post, but you can absolutely go find an advocate there. And I did mention it in the group when I was discussing the cost of an advocate, which are parent training centers. Now for there, you can go and get an advocate, and normally they're free. But again, sometimes you get what you pay for. So that's, again, something to consider. Plus what I was mentioning earlier about parent training centers, and then their job is to divert you away from due process. So if you're looking for someone to help you file for due process, you do not want to go to a parent training center. So I hope that answered your question, Tammy, and if it didn't, please let me know. And also, if you have questions concerning anything that you need for your child, I'd definitely be more than happy to help you, because that is what I want to do, right? I want to help the parents. I want to help make your confusion, your journey less taxing. I I mean, my journey for, like my life and how I became an advocate, it was very stressful, very taxing. And it's, I'm tearing up just thinking about it. There was a lot that went on for me to get to the point where I decided that I needed to educate myself. And I got tired of relying on others to give me correct information, because I found even though these people were credentialed, even though these people had degrees, often they weren't giving me the correct information, whether it was a doctor, a nurse, a teacher, a principal. It didn't seem to really matter. Like, these people didn't always know the right answers. And so I found I do better just figuring out what the answers are myself, and then maybe consulting with somebody who has experience in that, and then, getting some feedback, right? So I really encourage you to do your own research. Don't rely on anything. Don't even rely on me. I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, you're so smart. And I was kidding with my husband. I was like, yeah, I'm a super genius. I'm like Wile E. Coyote super genius, right? I'm falling off cliffs. I'm running in dark holes and getting hit with trains. I've made a lot of mistakes. And so, as I've continued to grow and learn, I tend to make less and less mistakes, but it doesn't mean I still don't make mistakes. So I highly encourage you, not just take anything that I tell you, go research it on your own. It doesn't matter what it is. Somebody was just asking me about my opinion on autism and vaccines. And I was like, man, that's a loaded question, right? Because like the topic on that is just nuts. And they were like, so do you have an opinion? And I'm like, of course I have an opinion. I got an opinion a mile long. I got an opinion on everything, but it's my opinion, and it's the way I read, I see, I interpret information. I don't mind sharing my opinion with you, right? But that doesn't mean that you're going to agree with me. That doesn't mean that we both read this one journal article and that we get the same information out of it. So again, do your own research. I really just can't stress that point enough. And I am here to help guide you in your research, or to help you get started in your research. I was telling my husband, I think the biggest issue with teaching people to do what I do is that I use a lot of keywords for things. And it's difficult if you are getting started. You don't know what the keyword is that you should be looking for. And so it's really helpful to have somebody who can go, oh, what you need is this. And so they can give you that information and kind of get you started and off into the right direction. And that's what I want to be able to do for you. And then you kind of take it from there and do your own research. Okay, so I know that's probably like way longer than y'all wanted to discuss that, but it's a very passionate topic for me. So Tammy was saying, should depression be added to an IEP? Technically it doesn't really matter. And what I mean is, to write the word depression on the IEP, because nobody except really school administrators tend to read the actual IEP. Now, what matters is, do you mean like add depression to the IEP? We're going to give you accommodations to help you deal with the issues you have with depression. Yes, that would be very important. And the teachers do read that. So I think that's great information to put into the IEP, but to make sure that it, is written in there somewhere that it says depression, I think it maybe should, right, in the very beginning where you discuss medical issues, because it is a medical diagnosis. But educationally speaking, it's kind of irrelevant. Now, I'm like, not the effects of depression. The effects of depression are relevant, but, like to say the word depression is not relevant. So look for adding accommodations or modifications as needed to address the issues related to the depression in the educational environment. But I wouldn't go anything beyond there. So Chelsea says, can you post about behavior issues for kids with global developmental delays? Yes. So Chelsea, what do you mean by post? So do you mean make a post in the group, to write a blog post about behavior issues related to developmental delay? And then it would be helpful to know like what kind of behavior issues you have, because developmental delay, I really hate that as a term because it's very all-encompassing. It's like when my children were young, they were considered to be globally developmentally delayed. Now, that's the medical diagnosis, not the educational, because there's an educational developmental delay too. But medically speaking, global developmental delay, GDD, it really buys you nothing. It doesn't really get you much in the way of help. It gets you services up until your child turns about 3. And that was one of the things I kind of had to fight with, because Joseph was labeled as globally developmentally delayed, and he had some major things going on with him, and the doctors wouldn't budge on his medical diagnosis. And so we hit 3, and then he kind of lost his services for a little while because I needed some kind of other eligibility category, and we didn't have one. So it really hurt us for a bit until I got things sorted out and I was able to get him his diagnosis of ataxic cerebral palsy. So once I did that, that finally helped me kind of get everything back together and get services back into place, along with getting him a walker and AFOs that he needed at the time. So if you're talking about developmental delay as far as an educational term, then it depends on what you're seeing in school. And that can be like a whole host of things. Usually developmental delays, just so you know, and again, this is not always, right? I can only kind of speak generally from what I see, is that usually developmental delay, it's an eligibility category, educationally speaking, for states up until a child at the latest turns 9. Now, some of the states cut it off earlier, and you can, but it can go no longer until when a child turns 9. Normally, whenever they get off of developmental delay and the school changes their eligibility to some other category, typically that is either autism or it's intellectual delay. So it depends on, and I think a little bit of that break is, what is their overall functional IQ score along with what are their adaptive skills. So again, I think that's kind of where all these things fall. So Melissa said, you know, I hate the diagnoses too. Now I wanted to say, because I talked about this earlier, and I dropped that post on homeschooling children with special needs. I know that having these diagnoses, you're like, I hate putting a label on my child. I get it, I really do. And then some of these, you know, can have some pretty big ramifications for them. But often you need these in order to get them services. So, you know, and especially on the medical side, because again, having these medical diagnoses can really help you tap into services that are available in your state. So with my children, finally getting a medical diagnosis of autism has allowed me to get them services with the DDD, which is our Department of Developmental Disability, or sometimes known as regional centers or other things. I mean, it depends, right, where you are. Along with getting respite, and respite, having someone come in and watch my children, so my husband and I can go out occasionally and just, you know, have a moment to ourselves, and then while we're out and we kind of have a date and have a moment to talk and reconnect, and then often we go grocery shopping. Why? Because sometimes it's just nice to go grocery shopping without your children and having a meltdown or having some kind of issue with them. So I highly recommend that if you have these medical diagnoses and you haven't looked before, do check out and see what services your state may offer, including respite. And I think it's worth kind of looking into that. So Angela said, hi, how are you? She said, our 6-year-old son has an IEP with a 1-to-1 aide. The aide is a building aide and not a TA. All right, so it really should be like a paraprofessional, and then schools will use aides. And so aide can be literally any adult person. So she said, what would be a good reason to fight for a TA versus a BA? I'm not sure what BA is. You lost me on that one. So I'm not sure what that's defined. So if you could tell me, I would appreciate it. And then also list what state you're in, because I'm sure it's a term that's relevant to your state. But like legally speaking, federally speaking, the federal law recognizes paraprofessionals. And paraprofessionals have certain requirements they must meet in order to be eligible as a paraprofessional. Normally that's at least 2 years of college. Normally they have to pass some kind of, background check exams and a few other things. Whereas an aide is, like I said, literally any adult human being who is in the school. It could be a teacher who is taking a moment during their prep period to come in and check. It could be theoretically the janitor, right? It could be any adult person who comes in to assist for a few moments. And I've even had a special education teacher tell me, now get this, she goes, my child has a one-on-one aide, it's listed in their IEP, but this aide, I don't have an actual aide in my class. What it is the vice principal, and he comes into my classroom, hi, how are you? Are things going okay? That's great. And then he leaves. And that's the child's aide. So something to think about, right? How is the aid being used? Is the aid assisting your child? Like, are they actually assisting your child? What are they doing? How often are they assisting your child? I mean, like, these are all very legitimate questions to ask the school. The biggest thing is, if you're looking for a true paraprofessional to work with your child, what you're going to need is to have to show need in the educational environment. So, oh, she was saying BA, so building aid. Got it. I was going to say, seriously, never heard of that before. But here's the thing. I see this aid person as being sort of what the special education teacher was telling me, right? They're just popping in. Hi, how are you? Are things okay? Do they need help? And the teacher's like, oh, it's fine. And then they go on. So you would need to show cause, like why? Oh, and she's in New York. Thank you, Angela, for letting me know. So you would need to show cause as to why your child would need a true one-on-one aid. And typically that's because a child isn't staying on task, a child's having behavior issues, a child who is a wanderer, because like my daughter is a wanderer. Those are all excellent reasons to have an aid. A paraprofessional, somebody who's one-to-one only with your child, not in a general way. So you need to kind of look into that a little more and find out how exactly is this aid being utilized? How are they assisting your child? What is the purpose of the aid? Just kind of to go through like who, what, where, when, why, like answer these questions and find out what's going on. And then that might help better direct you as to what you want to ask for. So Latanya was just saying they just diagnosed my daughter with autism and ADHD. Yay! I know that sounds weird, right? But yay, because that'll help you to get services. So I know it's not like the world's best information or the world's most exciting thing, right? Like, I don't know. I think I was weird. When my children were finally diagnosed, I think I felt relief, right? I was like, oh, okay. So now finally somebody not only sees and recognizes what I've been seeing, right? But they acknowledge it. They've given a label to it. We can now research it. We can understand it. We can address it, because with this information, I now understand and I know what to do and I know what needs to be done. And without it, it can be really hard. And then, like I said, it allows you to potentially apply for services and do other things. So, I think there are some real benefits when you can get an official diagnosis. Yeah, and I'm sure that you have probably noticed traits of autism and ADHD in your daughter, but it's difficult when you're like, hey, I see these things, and then everybody sort of brushes you off. So when they're finally recognized too, and this is a very important point to make, because girls, especially girls with autism, can really suffer from self-esteem and anxiety issues because their issues with autism aren't being addressed. And it's better, I think, to get these things addressed in order to help keep them from having that anxiety, to help them understand why they have these issues and these feelings that they do. So, hi, Sue. How are you this evening? And so Latanya was saying, I already did an IEP meeting for 2nd grade, and her diagnosis came back as autism and ADHD. Should I ask for a one-to-one? The school told me they wouldn't give her one, but now that I have the diagnosis, what do you think? So it's all about, can you prove your child needs that paraprofessional in the educational environment? There needs to be a reason that you can give, and really hopefully more than one, right? I mean, like wondering alone, that's a great reason. But most of the time, if it's just like my child's needing to be redirected or something like that alone isn't necessarily a good enough reason. Now, if you had the teacher constantly sending you stuff like, your child didn't have a good day today, they were distracted and they had to redirect them, and then we have their behavior chart and they went to, I don't know, whatever weird color they use now, because like the colors don't make sense to me. But like if you keep getting a bunch of those from the teacher and you're hearing all of this stuff, that is actionable. And that is a good reason to go, you know what, my child needs a one-on-one aid. The teacher can't, my child's taking too much of the educational time from kind of the other students. And so my child needs an aid in order for them to stay in the least restrictive environment and to be able to be redirected and refocused on back to the things that they need to be doing. So those would be kind of how I would go about arguing and making that sort of argument. Let's see. So Betsy said, if you have a child with a disability that has been accepted in open enrollment in Arizona, so hi Betsy, I'm also in Arizona in Phoenix, and they have been attending private schools with no IEP, you do not believe they need significant support beyond what could easily be provided in mainstream. What are your obligations to disclose the disability? Technically, you're under no obligation because parents at any time could revoke special education services. So no, you are not required to say anything. And then she goes, furthermore, after the district accepts the enrollment and then finds out about the disability, can they unenroll the child or force you to change placement within the district? So no, they can't, and maybe. So let me explain. For if you're moving to a public schools cannot turn away a child with a disability. They just can't. So that's not an issue. I wouldn't worry about that. If they've been accepted, the school district, if it is a public school, they must take them. If it's a public charter school, they must take your child. Now, can they force them to another placement within the district? Maybe. It depends on what's going on. If your child is really not having that big of an issue, then probably not. I mean, they wouldn't bother to move a child out of their home school to either another school within the district or to place them in a private school. It's very costly for public schools to do that, and they don't like doing it. They will, but they don't like it. So they tend to only do that when it comes to issues with behavior. So if your child is having behavior in the class, then yes, there's a real possibility they may do that. Now, what I suggest, this is what I would do. What I would suggest doing is to let your child be enrolled and then talk to the school and ask them for a 504 and then disclose to them potentially what your child's disability is in order to get your child a 504 in place. With that, they are then provided accommodations in the general education setting. Hopefully that will be enough. If it is not for some reason, at least you have some kind of law to work under in order to squeeze the school to get them to do more. So that's kind of my recommendation, Betsy, and like I said, just something to think about, right? Let's see. And then also please let me know if you have any other questions or kind of more to that story. So Tammy was saying, you're right that I will continue to read and research. Yay, I like reading and researching. That's what I needed to know about the depression, to see if they needed to add accommodations. Absolutely, they need to add accommodations. And if you need help in figuring out what kind of accommodations would be helpful, just let me know. I will easily find that information for you and then share it with you in the group. Let's see. So Angie says, how do you prove my child needs a paraprofessional because I haven't asked for one yet, but I think he does need one. He's always being redirected, and he's extra forgetful. He has autism, ADHD, and severe anxiety, and we're in Illinois. So yes, here's my suggestion. You need to look then, right, at kind of like whatever paper trail, whatever paper the school has done, you know. So like I said, these kind of teacher, you know, write-ups or things, or anything the teacher is like in a report card, notes home, anything. Pull all that information together so that you can, you know, because I look at it as like an attorney, right? I'm building a case. I'm putting together my argument to present to say my child needs a paraprofessional. Here's why. In the educational environment, my child, the teacher is saying constantly needing to be redirected. The teacher is saying he takes too much of her time because she's constantly having to redirect him. On his report card, you know, you can see that he has poor executive functioning skills because he's very forgetful. He leaves his stuff behind. He's not organized. His teacher has written me notes saying that he's forgotten his homework. These are all things that you would try to use to make an argument for a paraprofessional. And again, there's no guarantee that they will give you a paraprofessional, but you will be able to get a prior written notice for a denial of the paraprofessional, along with the reasoning as to why they denied you the paraprofessional. So then you can take that and keep kind of building on that, because you know, just because you asked and were denied doesn't mean you can't ask again. So as more information comes in, as more things come together, then you can sit there and go, hey, I'm coming back. I'm reconvening an IEP meeting. I want to revisit this again. You denied me before. Here's what you said. Now I'm coming back and I'm telling you we have this, 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 and this, and this going on, and my child still needs the paraprofessional because of these issues. And so like you just keep reconvening IEP meetings and sort of keep squeezing the school on this topic. So either your child will start getting more and more accommodations, the school, because one of the ways to approach that, right, is also just to ask the teacher and to ask the school, here are all these things you're complaining to me about, here are all the issues my child is having, what are you going to do, what are you proposing to do so that we can fix this, you know, and address these deficiencies for my child. And sometimes it's interesting just to see what they throw out. Occasionally they throw out things that are helpful and useful. Sometimes they don't though. And like I said, when they don't, then you just get your prior written notice and then reconvene another IEP meeting, and then keep getting your prior written notices and convening meetings. And at some point you're going to get to the point that you either need to file a state complaint or due process, or the school will give. So like one of those three should happen. So again, things to think about, because and also with autism, ADHD, and severe anxiety, there are lots of accommodations and modifications that you can put into place. And in the group, I have units. So if you haven't been able to take the time to read the units, or if you haven't been able to find them, because some people have told me like I can't find them. So if you haven't been able to read the units or be able to find the units, please let me know, because I have a lot of links and information. I'm trying to use the units in such a way that I'm gathering resources together that address a specific topic that are often asked about in the group. So that's kind of what I'm trying to use the units for. Also, I try really hard to label everything. So you can always search the group. If you do not know how to search the group, please let me know. But I try to hashtag, like when you see me hashtagging things, this is what I'm doing. I'm trying to mark it for you. So if you come through and you ever want to search the group, you can search. So for autism, I would search hashtag ASD. I would search hashtag ADHD. I would search hashtag EF for executive functioning. And I would also look for hashtag anxiety. You will see a ton of information in the group under each one of those searches. And many of those will include accommodations. So Ashley is saying, hello, hi Ashley, how are you? She said, I have a question and it's hard for me. She said, my child at 4 is diagnosed with mixed adjustment emotional disorder. So age 5, ADHD, age 8, ODD, She is currently 9. She struggles in math, reading, writing, and language classes. CD grades. We just did another routine eye exam. Sorry, this question's a little long, so bear with me here. So we just did another routine eye exam. The dilated test showed that she has straining eyes, trying to focus and concentrate, farsighted eye, and got prescription glasses. She has currently been doing lab work and MRI brain with and without contrast, and an evaluation from a psychologist. They are saying ADHD, neurological, underdeveloped anxiety. No, let's see. So I'm guessing like it's what would be called like subclinical anxiety, that, you know, she's anxious, but it hasn't quite gotten to the level of being considered clinical. So FAS, so fetal alcohol syndrome, I'm assuming, and a sleep disorder. Vitamin D is low. You know, I have that problem too. Triglycerides are through the roof, and glucose is low. Ferritin is low. And by the way, for the iron pill, I look for some kind of mix. Look for something that's gentle, because iron pills can be very constipating. So something to think about, because being constipated, often you see this a little more in children with autism, and they often have gut issues and wind up having constipation. And sometimes behavior is caused by constipation. So just throwing that out there is something else to think about. Anyways, though, she said, my question is, I'm very heartbroken. They think ARND. So she said, I have genetic blood. Let's see. So I have genetic blood, ADHD, anxiety, autism for close relations to my daughter. I also see a huge amount of sensory issues. By the way, sensory alone, unresolved or unaddressed sensory problems alone can cause immense behavior problems. So again, something to consider. An OT, there are OTs out there who are specifically trained to deal with sensory issues. I would look for that, right? But even if you can't, just an OT who is familiar with, you know, working on doing sensory work, that would be, I'm sure, extremely helpful. So anyways, she was going on to say, I mean, she literally has meltdowns while dressing and picking clothes. Part of that may be because she has fine motor problems. And it's like what I was talking about earlier, right? You need good fine motor in order to manipulate buttons. And because she finds it frustrating, she winds up having a meltdown because her threshold of, you know, kind of this being patient is very low. And so has these angry outbursts. So let's see. She said, I've waited for months for a diagnosis, long wait list, and now I'm confused over the diagnosis. I don't have a confirmed pregnancy until 6 weeks, but I knew 4 weeks. Okay, I'm a little lost there, what that was saying. It was originally positive 6 weeks. All right. I'm thinking she's saying that she's about 6 weeks pregnant. She said, or she was 6 weeks pregnant. And then she said at a couple of drinks a few times when I was a senior in high school weekend. Now, that shouldn't alone cause these issues. But she said that my daughter has behavior issues and learning issues, but no facial proof of fetal alcohol syndrome. And this ARND is a possibility, but it could be wrong or a misdiagnosis. She is more social and loves hugs. Everyone rambles on and is so silly. So they say she is too open and social for autism. That's not true, actually. And that's kind of what I was saying earlier about girls and autism. Often girls are misdiagnosed with autism. And there's a really great article in the group that discusses girls with, I have girls with autism in the group. Like this comes up often. But there is this article about behavior and all of these behavioral diagnoses and other diagnoses children tend to kind of rack up before they finally get diagnosed with autism. It was a great journal article. So I will repost that again, and I'll post it here with your answer. So I wouldn't say no, that she doesn't have autism. I think very realistically, she may have autism. So just know and be aware, as you continue to see things and see signs. I don't know, because I haven't looked and I don't have any of her information that, her psychologist or others are seeing. But I wouldn't just exclude it. And it's, like I said, very common for girls to be misdiagnosed. So hold out some hope. You need to get the sensory issues addressed. She needs to work on executive functioning, this self-regulation, self-control. I would look potentially to see about getting her some kind of classes or something with anger management, so that she knows how to appropriately deal with her anger and frustration. That could be done truly through cognitive behavior therapy with a psychologist, or maybe ABA therapy. So there's a few different mechanisms that you could do. You could also look to the school and add in a sensory diet for her. Most schools are familiar with sensory diet. It is something that is commonly used. I have mentioned it in the group many times, and you can look in the group and search for #sensory and find a lot of information concerning sensory and sensory diet. And again, I will, when I'm done, I'll sweep back through. Normally I come back through and I try to answer any questions. To those of you who asked questions last week, I'm terribly sorry. Do you know, I never have been able to get in to see what any of those comments are. I'm like, I still can't get in to see any of them. And I don't really understand why. Let's see. So Ashley was saying, also diagnosed with executive function disorder. Yes. So ADHD and executive functioning disorder kind of go hand in hand, like kind of like the fine line between executive functioning disorder and ADHD looks to be, right now, diagnostically speaking, that you trial somebody on ADHD medication, and if it is not effective, then they have executive functioning disorder. The hallmark of ADHD is executive functioning. It's executive functioning impairment. So any of the things for that I have in the group, which I have a lot, I have again, #EF for executive functioning. I have a lot of information in the group on executive functioning. I also have some blog posts. I've written several times on blog posts about executive functioning, and those are all found on aesa.group's website under the blogs. And you can also find all that information in the announcement post. All of my blog posts I try to put in the announcement post too, and you can find it in the units under ADHD/executive functioning. It's in the units in there too. So I have it in all of those various places. Let's see. So there's a few people kind of responding back to others. Hi, Chelsea. I saw that you joined. How are you this evening? Let's see. So Ashley was saying why I think autism is two of her cousins have autism and other issues. So to me, that makes it even more likely that she may have autism. So, like I said, I wouldn't worry too much about that yet. I mean, like, take where I'm going with this is, right, take the diagnoses and sort of run with it. It's what you got for now. It helps open the door for some services. It maybe helps explain some of your child's behavior. Is it necessarily great? No, but it's something, right? It's something to start with, and it's something to work on. And again, it's not uncommon that you will have these children, especially girls, who are not appropriately diagnosed. And so you have to keep going back. It is not uncommon for girls with autism not to be diagnosed with autism until somewhere between the ages of 9 to 14. 14. I mean, it's a long time to go undiagnosed. So, again, lots of information. I have a whole Dropbox folder full of peer-reviewed articles discussing girls and autism and how girls present differently than boys in autism, and how prevalent the rate is for their misdiagnosis. So if you are interested in that information, absolutely can send the Dropbox link, and I will link it in here in just a little bit and leave it for you. So Jamie was saying, our daughter let's see, so SLD, basic reading deficits, anxiety, perfectionism disorder. She's in 7th grade, and it said the team is not supplying IEP minutes for speech pull out and push in. We have daily logs at home and have asked for school logs for push in and pull out minutes. And the school is blatantly making up minutes serviced in the classroom. I am not surprised. She said, our daughter has stated that SLP has never pushed into her general ed classroom. Not surprised there either. Missing 80 minutes per month, push-in time, 8 months now is 640 minutes so far. She goes, what can we propose? Thanks if you get to my question. So yes, I am glad I got to your question, and no. So what I would do is I would write the school and I would point all this out. Tell them your daughter has told you you haven't been able to produce minutes. If you have not done a FERPA request, I highly urge you to do so. Because a FERPA request will get you the documentation that they have in her cumulative folder, and that's what you're wanting. So another thing too is under the FERPA request, I would request emails related to your daughter about anyone that you think may be involved in trying to cover up her lack of services. And I have a letter, it's called a letter to Husk, that helps explain the importance of your FERPA request, what is included in the FERPA request, and that emails in particular are part of a FERPA request. If you cannot get it that way, if the school is just like, nope, no way, we're not happening, we don't have it, whatever dumb thing that they may tell you, know that in your state and your Department of Education, you can do a FOIA request, a Freedom of Information Act. Now, it does cost money. So, you know, you want to be careful about the things that you're asking for so it doesn't churn up too much information. But you want to do this FERPA and FOIA request if needed so that you can kind of start gathering evidence. This is so significant. This may be worthy of due process, right? Matter of fact, it probably is worthy of due process. I'm just going to say that straight out. The denial of services is so big, it's worthy of due process. Now, you can ask the school and say, I would like for you to pay for services for my daughter over the summer, not put her in summer school because they're not going to really have anything in summer school. They're going to tell you they want you to have her in summer school and they'll offer her services then. But unless they're offering one-to-one services with a speech therapist, right? Not a speech therapy assistant, but a speech therapist, I would be like, no. Because again, this is such a denial of FAPE. It's worthy of due process. And in due process, you could probably get this outside tutoring service over the summer, you know, because that's the whole issue, right? We don't want her getting any further behind. Well, she's now had all this time that she hasn't been getting her service, so she is getting a little further behind. You know, she's aging and everybody's aging. So it's really important that you get in and kind of address this right away. The school is not going to have the capacity to do it over the summer. Again, unless they retain a speech therapist to work one-on-one with your child. So I would send a letter. I would say all of this, and then I would tell them, hey, I would like to have you to pay for a speech therapy center to work with her over the summer for this, you know, 640 minutes. If they come back and they're like, we're not going to do that, you know, we'll do 400, you'd be like, great, I'll take that. Because anything that you get that's going to be direct service with a therapist, not a therapy assistant, but the therapist, it will be quality time for her in therapy. So that's kind of what I would be looking for, is some kind of one-on-one with a speech therapist. And even if it's half that minutes, I would take it, because it's probably better than she ever would have gotten had she just gotten that service in the school anyways. So let's see. So Chelsea is saying that we're still having behavior issues, but it's helped a lot to follow through with discipline at home and on those days. And she was saying hi to my kids. I know Chelsea, we've known each other for quite some time, and I know her from when I lived in Vegas. I miss Vegas, by the way. Phoenix is even hotter than Vegas. I did not know that was possible. And it's wetter and more humid. It's terrible. So, but they have great services here. So here I will stay. Anyways, so I'm really glad to hear. It is important to have discipline follow through. If your child does get in trouble at school, you know, you want to follow through to let them know, like, you know, you can't do that. But if he's still having behavior issues and they're frequent, you may want to go back and kind of reassess, like, is the behavior plan effective? Are there kind of other learning disabilities or other things that aren't being addressed, and that's what's kind of escalating the behavior? And the only way you can know that is to get the information, right? To find out, hey, you know, like what triggered the behavior. So hopefully they're sending you that information, Chelsea. I really hope so, because I know schools don't always do that. But it's really important to kind of know these antecedents is what they call them, right? Like what caused the behavior. And so, and if you notice kind of a trend of what caused, you know, maybe it always happens at transitions. You know, we're in a class and we're moving and we're about to go to another class. Well, if it's always happening at transitions, then maybe that's a good reason to ask for that one-on-one aid to help you with transitioning during that time to help keep them calm, you know. So just something to think about as kind of a potential way to help reduce any additional behavior issues that he might be having at school. So Ashley was saying, thank you so very much. I know I'm not going to let her diagnosis define her. And yes, don't do that, by the way, because I will tell you now, my son Joseph, I am not joking. I am not even joking. This is part of that trauma I had from the very beginning. I literally lost one of my children the day after she was born. And that's why I have surviving quadruplets. And so after she passed away, they literally told me at the hospital, don't bury her yet. We're not sure your son Joseph will survive. And so we didn't. We waited. And you know, Joseph made it. He made it home. He died, almost died the night that he came home. He turned blue. Please go away, James. He turned blue. He quit breathing. I had to perform CPR. My husband had to call an ambulance. I had to take him down to the hospital, and he was diagnosed as a case of missed SIDS. Thankfully, I had consulted with some other moms who told me, do not walk out of that hospital without an apnea monitor. And thank God, because he would have died at home had I not listened to their wise advice. And his monitor kept going off. It kept going off. It kept going off. There were several times it kept going off. I'm doing chest rubs really hard, trying to get him to breathe. He's not breathing. And we're rushing him to the hospital. After 4 times in a month that we rushed him to the hospital, they finally were like, might be something else going on here. We need to do a few more tests. And it turned out that he had significant GERD. And due to his hypotonia, he wasn't able to squeeze it out hard enough and to, you know, spit up essentially, right? Because that is what babies are doing. They're refluxing when they're spitting up and they have all that milk come out. So he was not able to do that because his tone in his core is too low. And it was coming up way high into his throat. He was aspirating on it. And we didn't realize that is what was happening. So he had a fundoplication and that fixed the issue. Great, right? Now, the next thing they told me is, wow, he's a floppy baby, which I knew that, right? You could pick him up and he was like one of those cheap baby dolls. He just, everything, his head, back, his arm, everything. He was a floppy baby. And that was kind of my first clue when I went and I was like, you know, I'm going to go do research. I'm going to research what does it mean when your child is floppy like that? What does that say? You know, what's going on? What causes a child to be floppy? They shouldn't be like that. And so it was in that kind of investigation I found that tends to be usually a sign of neurological problems. So, of course, we went and consulted with a neurologist. Now, we'd already been talking to some specialists, but I had to go in and I had to really consult with this neurologist. And they're like, all right, so I just wanted to let you know that, you know, your child is fine. Don't worry about them being floppy. You know, he's not really moving and stuff. And he may be a vegetable. We're not really sure. But, you know, like, just kind of wing it and see how things go. And it's like, what? What are you talking about? So, not only did I hear that Joseph would die, then I heard that he would be a vegetable. And then I heard he would not walk. He would not talk. He would not do all of these things, right? It turns out they were all wrong. They couldn't be more wrong. My boy walks. My boy talks. And I really think one day he will have a job, a professional job for him to do. And now it may not be like what you think of as a professional job, but it's a skilled job for him to do. And the doctors never, ever would have considered him being able to do that. So never let anyone define your child. It's one thing, because I mentioned earlier, right? It's important to get these labels. It is. It really is. But it's important to get services. That's why you get the label. It's not to define your child. It's not to go, oh, my child has autism. Oh, no, my child will never be functional. My child won't live independently. My child won't work. No, what that means is now we understand what the issue is. What's the underlying thing that's going on with my child? Now I can help them address it. Now I understand they need explicit instruction. That if they're going to be social, I need to model for them how to be social. The Janet from Homeschooling, she was like, I met your son, James, and he's so social. And he introduced himself and this, that, and the other. That's because I modeled it. I modeled to him how we were supposed to interact. He did not know. And he wasn't going to pick up by just watching. I had to literally show him and walk him through what you needed to do. So you can completely do that. But you can only address and fix problems if you know and understand what the problem is. If you don't label it, if you don't define it, if you don't attempt to understand the problem and maybe the underlying causes and mechanisms behind the problem, how are you ever going to fix it? So I really appreciated, like I said, not only getting these diagnoses for my children, but it helped me understand like where are they deficient. And then, for me, it's like, okay, well, now that I know that I have these deficiencies, what can I do to address them? What can I specifically do to help them be the most that they can be? I want to enable them to be really whatever it is that they want to be. And I can only do that if I give them the tools in the beginning. And that's part of where I just recently wrote and I posted a new blog post, and I'll post it here in the group after we're done, about adaptive skills and how important adaptive skills are. And these are very basic things. It's kind of like we were talking about earlier, right? Of being able to button your clothes and stuff. Your child needs good adaptive skills in order to be an independent functioning adult. And the way most children who have disability wind up learning these skills is they need to be explicitly shown like what it is that we need to do, and then they need to be, like to actually do it, and then do it repetitively until they get it down. And sometimes that takes a long time. But it's worth the fight and the effort, because in the end, you want your child to be a fully functioning, independent adult, right? That's the goal. They were talking about socialization and homeschooling, and a lot of people are like, it's such an important thing, socialization and homeschooling. No, it really isn't. A lot of people are really concerned in particular about peer socialization and homeschooling. And I'm like, I don't care about peer socialization. You know what I care about? What I care about is, can my child interact with adults? That's what I care about. I'm not training my child to be a child. I'm training my child to be an adult. They're going to be an adult anytime, like after 18 for the rest of their life, which is hopefully a very long time, right? Like 60 years, I'm hoping. And so I want them to be able to do the things that they need to do, which includes socializing with other adults. And I was just reading an article about, it was children with autism and children with Down syndrome. And it was talking about what is the biggest limiting factor for them to be able to be independent. And you know what it was? I found this really interesting. It wasn't the domestic chore part, you know, like I think that is a very important component because you don't want them living in a sty or something that's unhealthy and unsanitary. But no, actually what the biggest limiting factor for a child being an independent adult or growing into being an independent functioning adult was socialization, being able to socialize with other adults appropriately, because that was what kept them from getting a good job. How's that, right? Socializing with adults, understanding the social cues and the subtle social cues that adults do, not children. Children usually aren't very subtle. You know, when children don't like you, they'll bully you. It's not subtle at all. I mean, they'll just tell you, I hate you. And then they'll bully you. But it's the more subtle adult social interaction that they need to learn. And I think that's an important part that we wind up missing because we are too focused on this peer socialization when we really should be looking a little more at how our child interacts with adults and how they'll continue to interact with adults as they age. So, all right, sorry, I went on another rant. But anyways, that was just my 2 cents on the topic. Let's see. So Ashley says, if you don't know, I have cats, by the way. So go on, Freddie, not right now. All right, so Ashley was saying, thank you so much. I know I'm not going to let my diagnosis define her. I want just the treatment options. I'm going to continue to help her with services. Just my heart feels a psychologist missed diagnosis. And honestly, I think you might be right. So that's why I said, don't give up, you know, continue, because you can go back, right? Like as soon as once a year, but normally you wait like 2 to 3 years and then go back, take your child back, have them do a full reevaluation, a medical reevaluation again. Go pick somebody else. Try to find somebody who's conversant with, you know, diagnosing girls with autism, because not all diagnosticians are. They should be, but often they're not. But she said that she changed my life for the better. You do awesome at this. Thank you so much. She said, and thanks for spending your nights with these informative talks. Well, you're very welcome. And again, as long as people are attending, as long as people find these useful, then I'll continue to do these, because that is the purpose behind it, is to try to give you as much information as I can and to be able to address whatever your concern and your question is. So Ashley was like, thank you so much for these live talks. You're very welcome. Jamie was saying, much thanks, will do. So great. Natalie's hi Natalie. Jamie said, you're very empowering. You really guide us with amazing tools. Thank you. Oh, that's so nice. Seriously. You guys are making me cry. Like, stop. Okay. Like, really. Okay. So anyways, so, oh my goodness. Is it Wei? I hope I said your name correctly. If I didn't, I'm very sorry. Anyways, Wei was saying that public school special ed, she said, what if the school has not been taking documentation of the behaviors, and that is most of the battle for me. Trying to get a paraprofessional. Son has autism, sensory issues, wanderer. Wandering alone should be enough to warrant a paraprofessional, because have there been any incidences where the school has lost your child? I think that's an excellent reason to have a paraprofessional. Not to mention the fact, some things you may want to think about is getting like a Joby or Angel Sense and having it attached to your child, so that if the child for some reason escapes the school again, you have a way to quickly locate them. And there's, oh, what it's called. It's Lifesaver, I think, that is run by usually local police departments, where they will attach a device to your child's ankle. It is a GPS locator. And if your child is lost, you just call the police. They'll immediately turn it on and they'll go find your child. So something to consider if you have a true wanderer, along with, and I know this may seem strange, but you may want to look into going and getting a medical diagnosis of wandering and add it to your child's medical files. And I know that I have mentioned this in the group before, and I can post the information again for the diagnostic medical code for wandering. But I think it's good to have it as backup in case, one, CPS is ever called on you, that you can go, this is a known issue. We've been dealing with it. My doctor knows about it. It's documented in my child's medical information. The other thing is that you may want it for is it may help you be able to push to get one, like Project Lifesaver, to get a device attached to your child. So again, just some little things to consider and think about. But she said, I consider him to be nonverbal because his vocabulary is limited to saying things he prefers or says all the time. But when you speak to him, he will smile and ignore or answer with incorrect answers or phrases. If it makes you feel any better, my daughter Margaret did exactly the same thing. And we got her intensive speech therapy. And so usually what they're doing is they're struggling to get that language. And for Margaret, now we found out that she did have and had suffered hypoxic brain injury. She lacked oxygen and it interfered with her brain and her brain connections. And that is part of the reason it was interfering with her speech. So, and I will let you know, Margaret now talks a lot. Margaret talks back a lot. So Margaret has gained her expressive speech. She did have good receptive speech, right? She understood what you said to her, but she couldn't seem to find the words to express herself. So what she would do is she used echolalic speech. She would sit there and say things that she saw in her TV shows. And sometimes they were weird, like it didn't offhand make sense what she was saying unless you happen to have watched the show and understood the context of that, whatever it was that she said, that phrase. So I understand what you're talking about, and do know and be encouraged that that probably means speech isn't too far off in the future. And so continue to work as hard as you can on speech therapy. Anyways, though, so the district swears, based on their information, whatever information that they have, that he can be in general ed without an extra assistance of a para. Now, if he does have limited speech, my question to you is, does he have an assisted communication device? I mean, like, how is he conveying what it is that he needs if his speech is limited? So I find that interesting. No, it does absolutely sound that he needs a para. Did the school lose him at any point, like I said? Because that is definitely a great reason to ask for a paraprofessional to watch him. The sensory and autism issues don't per se necessarily means he needs a paraprofessional, right? This is again where you go back and you look like, do you have teacher comments? Is the teacher saying things to you like, he's constantly having to be redirected. I see him fidgeting in class. He's rocking back and forth in the seat. Trying to think of like, what are some common things, I see a lot of flapping or something. Those would all be potentially good reasons to request more therapy from the school, right? Not necessarily for a paraprofessional. So kind of start thinking about like, what couldn't be resolved with therapy that would require the need of the paraprofessional? If the teacher is telling you, like, I had to redirect your son 6 times today, that would be a good reason for a paraprofessional. If the child lost, or if the school lost your child, that's a good reason to ask for a paraprofessional. If the teacher rarely complains or rarely says anything, it's a lot harder to do that. Probably what's happening is your son has a good teacher, and they're providing accommodations in the classroom that you may even be unaware of, and they're not formally documented in the IEP. And this can be very problematic because when he goes to, is promoted to the next grade, that teacher may not do the same things because it wasn't formally recognized anywhere. And then all of a sudden you can have people who wind up, they're like, oh, my child did so well last year, and then this year it's been terrible and it's been a disaster. Normally that's what's happening, is because that next year your child doesn't have as good of a teacher. They aren't as understanding. They aren't giving accommodations in the classroom. And so then like all of these issues kind of come to light and you're like, oh, so that's what's been going on. So again, just be aware of some things to potentially look for, how you want to make that argument, and also you want to use prior written notice to your advantage. Again, I mentioned this earlier, but every time they deny you a paraprofessional, you want that on your prior written notice, and you want the district to explain why they are denying your request. And so you keep coming back as you gather more data and more things happen and go, you know, I'm calling a new IEP meeting. I want to revisit the issue of a paraprofessional for my child. And this is why. And here's all these new data and information that I have to support the need, showing my child needs this paraprofessional. So, and he said, based from what I know from daily routines and in-home programs, the data shows and proves he requires assistance. So it says, do I share this information? So if you have your own data from medical evidence, it's worth potentially sharing that information. So you need to make that decision, but it is potentially worth it. So something to consider if it's part of the evidence that you're going to use to build this case to say, I need this paraprofessional. So boys, please be quiet. Be quiet. I don't care who it is. See, you're not the only one. This is my life. All right. So Julie says, hi, Michelle. Thank you for everything. You're quite welcome, Julie. Thank you. So Wyatt says, wow, I did not know that was possible. Absolutely. There's a lot of stuff that's possible. And the school will rarely tell you that, but there are. So this is why I hope you as a parent and you invite others and have them come here to this group so they can learn these things for themselves and be able to effectively advocate, not only for your child, but hopefully for others too, right? And kind of share the information that you learn. So Jamie said, she goes, in your opinion, is there a reason a team would not want to have the primary eligibility be SLD, which is specific learning disability? Oh my goodness, my brain just blipped. And she said, and would push for ED, emotional disability instead, when such child has no diagnosis of anxiety or emotional disability or any diagnosis at all. So in our opinion, she's been experiencing anxiety due to a growing academic gap. You know, that is completely possible. I mean, like, she's experiencing this anxiety due to the academic gap. Yeah, that's like a real and complete concern. Also, what about working memory? It's not uncommon children with lower working memory or lower processing speed to experience issues with anxiety. So, that's something to look into too, because you didn't mention kind of what the test scores are. But that's a possibility also, especially with lower processing speed, because normally children with slower processing speed have enough intellect to realize, right, like they can't keep up. Well, of course, that's going to cause anxiety. I mean, how would you like it if you kept showing up to work every day and you knew that whatever you did was going to suck because you couldn't do it fast enough, right? So, yeah, I mean, I would see how that would be causing terrible anxiety. So also sensory issues. Sensory issues that aren't being addressed or being aggravated in the classroom, those absolutely can cause anxiety also. And another thing to think about, right? So no, I really don't understand why a school would do this. You didn't also mention when testing was done. So one of the things to look at potentially is asking for an IEE. I mean, if you feel like it's just that off, and what happened, then you may want to look into getting that IEE, because when you ask for an IEE, and I do explain this extensively in my blog post of special education terms to know, I talk in there, boys, be quiet. Sorry. Anyways, I talk in there extensively about IEE and let you know that when you ask for an IEE, the school only has two options. One, they either have to grant your IEE, or two, they have to take you to due process and then defend what their exam was for your child. So this is part of the reason why I offer to do kind of like a review of the psychoeducational evaluation information to help you as a parent maybe find holes in the exams so that you have leverage to ask for an IEE. And again, I will look and review those for free if you just post the scores to the group, which is what Sarah did the other day. And I think that's also a real educational opportunity for everyone when I do those, because it helps you see some of the resources that I have, some of the resources that I use, and then kind of this, information and decision-making process. So anyways, some other things there, Jamie Wright, to consider. So Wei was just saying no, that we're working on that, and he does PECs. So PECs are good. It's kind of like the first level of things to use. Do try the PECs. If the PECs prove to be useful and successful, then you have some leverage then to ask the school for an assistive technology evaluation, an AT evaluation. And during the AT evaluation, they can look at other like electronic devices to help your child in his expressive communication. So there can be something beyond PECs. But normally when children are little, they do like starting with PECs, wanting to see, do they have enough of the receptive vocabulary, receptive language, that they understand what it is that's being said to them. And then they want to see, can they effectively use PECs? And it's cheap, like if PECs get destroyed for some reason, they're thrown in water, they're thrown across the room, whatever. It's no big deal. I mean, it's just paper that's been laminated. We'll make another one, But if you need an assistive technology device, those can be pretty expensive. And schools don't like handing those over to people unless they think the child can reasonably take care of it without, checking the device across the room. So that's kind of the criteria and why schools don't like giving them to young children. So just something to think about. So Brenna was saying my daughter is just on an IEP. No, just on an IEP is pretty good because IDEA is pretty extensive. And there are a lot of law. There's a lot of bite in the law comparatively for IDEA than, say, the Rehabilitation Act for Section 504. So I think the fact that she has an IEP is probably a good thing, and it gives you a little more leverage, especially leverage when it comes to, say, like looking at a way to remediate some issue that you're having with the school, right? So if you are having and needing some kind of dispute resolution, all of that's kind of really clearly laid out in IDEA. I mean, I really like it, and it's nice because there's specific laws I can point you to and go, federally speaking, this is what it says. And then it says over here in your state level, this is what it says. But when it comes to a 504, it's a lot looser, and it's like whatever process the district has made up, and then they have to disclose that to you, which is good, right? And sometimes it is the same process they use for IEPs, but not always. So it's just good, like I said, that the IEP has a bit more bite into it, and a few more ways in which you can kind of force the school to come to a resolution with you versus, fighting. So. So Brenda was saying that she has her speech, special education, and a para. So she spends, I would imagine, part of her day in the general education, part of her day in special ed, or all of her day in special ed is in a sectioned off classroom, essentially in special ed all day, and then a para. So the fact that you got a para, I'm sure will make some people on here very jealous. It is really hard to get a para. So if you did have one, that's really great. And again, if hopefully you won't have any issues with that. If you ever do, let me know, and I will do the best I can to help you figure out whatever it is that you need in order to kind of either bring them back or to quit sharing the pair with, because that's what often I see, that it's like a 1 to 4 or 1 to 3 or 1 to 2 or 2 pairs in a classroom and there's 15 kids or some other weird ratio. So, you know, so again, when you have a paraprofessional, it all comes back to, right, like need. What's the need? So Julie was saying, Michelle, if the child cannot initiate or complete any classwork without prompt and support, what are my options? Then you need a paraprofessional. That's essentially what that comes down to. That is a good reason to ask for a paraprofessional. The teacher can't stand over your child and make sure your child gets all of their work done. So often what you are going to need is a paraprofessional who will sit there and assist your child, not only redirect them back to the schoolwork that they're supposed to be doing in class, but also, you know, like assisting with teaching of the concept. So they're working on teaching the teacher, okay? So very important thing to know and understand, because I was just talking to a special education teacher about this. Paraprofessionals are not allowed to teach. Just so you know, they're not allowed. So they're not allowed to teach the concept. Now, they can collect data. They can reinforce a concept the teacher has taught, okay? But they are not allowed to teach your child. So when it comes to introducing new concepts, only the teacher of record, your child's teacher in the classroom, they're the only ones who are allowed to teach. So just so you're aware, okay? Now, what you're saying, and she's saying assignments require some form of handwriting, and Riley can barely write his name. If that's the case, did you have an assistive technology assessment done? All right, that would be one thing, because you need something in place, and then they need to start working on teaching him typing, okay? And yes, Julie, I know getting a para is so very difficult, but I think you have a good case. I mean, if your child is not completing any classwork, your child cannot write, then your child needs an assistive technology evaluation to determine, can he use a keyboard? Is he able to type? Another thing that they need to do is potentially looking at having a scribe for your child. Either another child in the classroom write stuff down for him, or have another adult in the classroom and just an aide, right? What we were talking about earlier. Not to say a paraprofessional, but an adult human being who can come in there and then work on writing stuff down for him. And then it says, he does not understand the directions for his assignments, and unless there's a one-on-one, he will stare around the room the entire time. So again, that does point to the need for the paraprofessional and things that you want to document, saying, you know, here's our need for the paraprofessional. So yeah, I think personally, Julie, you have a pretty good case for the need for a paraprofessional. Again, you just need to gather up the evidence and then go to the school and, you know, have this discussion about, here's what's going on, here's what I think we need. And then if they said, tell you no, like, don't walk away. Don't leave the negotiation table, right? You stand there and then you're like, it's fine. You boys, go to your room now. Now. Sorry. So basically what you're wanting to do is not to leave that negotiating table and say, hey, you've denied me the paraprofessional, fine. Now I want you to tell me what you are going to do to address this situation. Because it's not like you're going to bring all of this up and then walk away and say, oh, well, you said no paraprofessional, so I guess we can't do anything. No, you bring all of this up and go, no, you need to resolve what these issues are. And if you're not going to give my son a paraprofessional, then you need to explain to me what it is that you're going to put in place in order to assist my child, right? That way it forces him to do something. And then with that information, right, because we're gathering more information. They may have denied you the paraprofessional, but now they've done something else, and we're gathering that information too. If it proves to be not effective, right, then again, you call an IEP meeting and go, all right, I asked for a paraprofessional. Here's my prior written notice. Here's the reason you gave as the denial. Now I'm coming back to you again. We're still having issues. We did what you wanted, right? We put these things into place. They weren't effective. We have this data and it shows it wasn't effective. So now I'm coming to you again. I want a paraprofessional for my child because the things you have put into place is not effective. Hopefully at that point, they will just give you a paraprofessional. If not, again, same tactic, right? You're going to sit there and go, fine, you have denied me a paraprofessional for a second time. I wanted it in a prior written notice. This is my second request and you've denied it for a second time. And now I want to know, what are we going to do? What are we doing here? That's not effective. So we're throwing all that out the window, and now we're going to start with something new. So what is it that you're proposing? So again, you're going to go through this one more iteration, and then you're going to come back a third time, and you're going to say, I want the paraprofessional. So if you make it to a third time and you are denied for a third time, then I think that's worthy for due process. Because if your child still isn't doing well, the thing is they're trying to put into place twice, have proven to be ineffective. I don't know why they would keep denying you at that point, right? But that would be worthy of a due process case, okay? Because you've tried to do what you can to resolve it. You told the school what you think is needed. They've continued to ignore you, right? And so then you just go in and like, hey, I got all these prior written notices. I had asked, they denied me. And so now I'm here at due process because my child isn't getting what they need. They're not writing. They're not doing these things. So, all right. So we were saying, I am jealous, but I will keep pushing. So good. Yes, do keep pushing, right? This is what you have to do. I mean, I know it feels like you're beating your head against a brick wall, and honestly, you kind of are, because it's just that slow to get the wheels of justice turning in the special education system. It's terrible, I promise. But that doesn't mean that you should give up, right? Perseverance is the name of the game. And continue to come here. I will continue to help you. I will continue to supply you guidance. I will continue to supply you with anything and everything that I think will be helpful to you in order for you to kind of push your case against the school district. So don't give up. Continue to persevere, okay? So Brenda was saying, is the school just as good as a professional when it comes to retesting her later? Okay, so here's my opinion. This is my opinion, okay, on that. No, I don't think they are. The school psychologists don't have the same level of training as a clinical psychologist necessarily, and especially who I would want to go see, which is a neuropsychologist. Now, I like in particular to go see neuropsychologists because neuropsychologists look at how is the brain processing information? And that information, I think, more than anything else, is very enlightening. And you will never get that from the school. The school will never have a neuropsychologist on staff. They're very expensive. I mean, this is somebody who literally has training in neurology and psychology. They're kind of like double, trained specialty. So a school district would never have somebody that specialized on their staff. They're too expensive. Typically, you find them at your local children's hospital, and you use your medical insurance to get you over there and to pay for the evaluation. Now, sometimes it can be very difficult depending on how limited neuropsychologists are in your area. But I suggest a neuropsychologist, and after that, I would look into some kind of child psychologist who is experienced at doing evaluations. Again, you don't tend to see that kind of level of expertise out of child psychologists, and honestly, they don't really have the time. I mean, like counselors, when we were talking in the group, and I don't know if all of you saw this, but somebody was posting asking about counseling services from the school. Yes, you can get counseling services from the school. I mean, it's something the school should offer. But it's been in the news repeatedly about how counselors There's more security officers usually in a school district on staff than there are counselors on staff in a school district. So their caseload is immense. I think for the state of Arizona, it was like 450 students for every counselor. Like, how can they possibly spend quality time with a child and really help them with any kind of issues that they're having? I don't think they really can. So can you get services? Yes. Will they be good services? I don't think so. I think you do better to go and get medical services. Same with this. Can you get tested by the school district? Yes, you can. Do I think they'll do as good of a job as somebody who uses your medical insurance and does an evaluation? I don't think so. I think your medical evaluation will be a better, more thorough evaluation. So, and again, this is just kind of my opinion and what I've seen and what I've witnessed in, getting these done for my children over the years. So, Joseph Patrick. I'm pretty sure, James, I told you to go to your room. So this is what happens when my husband is not home to play interference for me with my children. All right. So Mariana said, my daughter does not have an IEP, but she has issues with eating in the morning and won't hardly eat lunch in the 10 minutes she gets in the 10 minutes that she gets. Yeah, like lunchtime is ridiculous in schools. I don't know how kids manage to wolf their food down. So she was saying, do you recommend getting a 504, asking them to give her a snack break or something? She comes home so hungry with a headache many times that I've spoken to the principal setting up a 504 plan, and she said it wasn't necessary. However, my daughter hasn't had any help to get a snack break. So yes, actually you can get a 504. See, don't let the principal fool you, right? So you absolutely can get a 504 as long as your doctor will write a note saying that it's medically necessary she gets a snack. So is your doctor willing to do that? If so, then yes, you can go get a 504. They are needed and required to get snacks. Like, how can a child really sit and learn well when they're hungry and they have a headache? They're not going to. So I don't know why they wouldn't give her a snack. I mean, like, why they wouldn't let her have a break and have a snack. I don't understand that. But yes, potentially you could get that in place. So just know that. But you would need to get a note from your doctor who says it's medically necessary that you give her that break and you let her have a snack because her blood sugar is going too low or something. And it's causing her to have headaches and dizziness and whatever. So anyways. So Brenda was saying, yes, share a para for one class. See, what did I say earlier, right? As long as it's working for you, that's great. If it starts to become a problem, then, let me know, and then we can see what we can do to argue for, another paraprofessional either to work solely with your child or to add another paraprofessional to the classroom to help the first one, be able to manage everybody. So Jamie was saying spot on, lower processing speed and working memory and can't keep up. So anxiety is definitely causing extrasensory issues. We pushed to get SLD, but thanks for the in-depth insight. Have a great night. Thank you. So you're very welcome, Jamie. And yes, I understand these issues that you're talking about with the slow processing speed. It is a problem I have with my son, Joseph, who has the super slow processing speed. He does have those difficulties sometimes with anxiety. If too much is changing, there's not enough routine, because people have slow processing speed. There actually can be very intelligent people. When people meet my son, they think he's intellectually delayed. His IQ says he's intellectually delayed, his functional IQ at 68. So he seems like he's intellectually delayed. But until you really sit down with him and really start chatting with him, you realize, actually, no. He's quite smart. Now, due to his slow processing speed, he likes routine. he really thrives in routine. He likes watching the same thing over and over again. Like the other day when I did one of these Facebook Live Q&As, and I was like, oh, he likes to take his Kindle and connect it to a speaker. And he came over here and corrected me and was like, no, it's the Ion Pathfinder 2. He's right. That is the name of our speaker. He has gone on YouTube, found YouTube videos about our Ion Pathfinder 2, and have watched instructional videos about our Pathfinder. And he knows the functions and everything involved in that better than I do. If I need something done, I ask him to do it because he knows how to, because he's taken the time to watch these videos over and over again.
Yeah, I'm actually a great mechanic. like doing functions and stuff.
So he heard me talking about him. He's like, yeah, I'm a great mechanic doing functions and stuff. Yes, he is, because he watches these instructional videos until he knows the device and how the device functions like completely. And that's all part of that routine. It's his way of controlling that by learning all he can about it, right? So anytime he wants to use it, he knows, because he's already learned all the information he needs to know in order to manipulate that electronic device. So that's what he's doing. So something to think about, right? About keeping like a steady routine, keeping things not necessarily the same, right? You don't want him getting too comfortable to think like, we have to keep everything exactly the same. And if it doesn't, the world blows up. No, we don't want them to be like that. But we do want them to feel like, hey, there are some ways in which you can empower yourself. And here are some things that you can do. So if you need more help with that, Jamie, please let me know and I will help you. So V said, the district told me during the initial IEP meeting, my 3-year-old speech is 50% recognizable. What is typical? Well, it is more than 50%. Most children have 80% or higher recognition with their speech. She goes on to say he was denied services. I chose not to sign the IEP. Okay, so I'm a little confused. He was denied services. Do you mean like speech? And then you said you chose not to sign his IEP. So they're like they were offering him an IEP, and if they were, what were they offering him an IEP for? And then it said, when and how do I ask for a prior written notice considering the IEP is not signed? You know, that's a good question. I'm going to have to think about that because I don't think anybody has ever asked me, because normally a prior written notice is done after the IEP meeting for anything that you're denied in the IEP meeting. And so what was it that they denied? Were they only denying speech? Like, were you okay with the rest of the IEP, but they missed speech and you felt like they had an issue with speech? If so, then I would want that documented. I would go ahead and sign the IEP, and then I would tell them that in the prior written notice, I want the fact that he has 50% recognizable speech and you're denying him speech services. Because normally that means there's an issue with like articulation, typically. And so she was like, sorry if this is a dumb question. Just so you know, I am a firm believer there is 0 dumb questions. There is never a dumb question. If you have a question, it's a legitimate question, no matter how dumb or idiotic you think it may be. Because if you don't ask, what's dumb is you don't know the answer, and now you still don't know the answer. That's dumb, right? But asking, that's never dumb. Never, never. All right, so she went on to say, I'm just confused. I don't want to make any mistakes. I did it with my eldest by accepting what's been determined, and I would like an IEE. Yes, I would definitely ask for an IEE. And she said actually all was denied, and he did not qualify for IEP services. They said his delays are age appropriate. No, it doesn't sound like it. What they're trying to do is make probably some big blanket statements, like, for instance, his speech recognition was a subtest and some other tests that they were doing. And so they said, you know, that was really low, but this other part of the subtest he did well in. And so those scores together, the index score is in the average range. That's usually what they pull. And that's not necessarily correct. This is, again, where I offer the services to review the psychoeducational evaluation to help you find. Matter of fact, V, you just said yes, exactly. See, because I know, right? This is what they do. It's a common tactic, V, so don't feel bad. It happens to many people. But that's part of the reason I offer that service, to review the psychoeducational evaluation, because I've learned enough to be dangerous with the psychoeducational evaluations. I'm not perfect. I am not a psychologist. I mean, I tell people all the time, I'm going to tell you again, I'm not a trained psychologist. I'm not actually a teacher or an educator. So I haven't ever worked in a school district. I'm not a lawyer. That doesn't mean that I can't learn. That doesn't mean I can't research. That doesn't mean that I'm not an intelligent person. I'm a very intelligent person. I have 2 bachelor's degrees. I have a master's degree, and I can read and understand English. So yes, you can completely educate yourself, and I've worked very hard to educate myself, to understand what the psychological ramifications are, what these developmental disabilities are, and then kind of like, what's the ramifications of that, and what do we see at home and in the educational environment when a child has certain disabilities. So I don't mind if you want to, like I said, what Sarah did, to take the information from the psychoeducational evaluation and put it in the group for $40. I'll review it privately. So either way, like however you want to go, it doesn't matter to me. But, you know, I think that's where you might need some help, and then we can help you potentially find holes in their evaluation so that you can then have a little more leverage, like feel a little more comfortable asking for that IEE. But it sounds like, no, that's completely what you need to do. So, and then yes, you're quite welcome, but do hang in there. Don't let this go. I do think you're on the right track, and I do think that you want to ask for that IEE. Denial of service doesn't sound appropriate in this case. And I think there's probably more in there. Because one of the other things that they do, by the way, and I did post this in the group under Sarah's post, where it had her child's test scores, which is a psychoeducational sheet where it has basically all of the different psychometric test scores. So like standard scores, Z scores, percentile ranking, descriptors. Seems like 1 or 2 other things. I mean, like it's very comprehensive, and I really like it because I think it's a lot more informative for most people than the typical like bell curve that they hand you. Like for most people, it doesn't mean diddly squat. When I first saw it, I didn't mean diddly squat. The going bothers to explain it to you and explain what it means. So I really like this sheet much better. And then you can see like at the 25th percentile, the 25 standard score, which is often the measures that you see in these psychoeducational evaluations or standard scores. And so at 25, technically a child is in the average range. Now, what they don't tell you is at 24, they are then considered like borderline. No, low average, no, borderline. I don't remember now. It's been a very long day for me. So whatever it is, though, it's then kind of considered impaired, okay? And normally actionable by the school. Now, the other part is that there is something called a confidence interval. And this is sort of where I often get the schools, is because if you go look up the psychometric tests that they use, so for example, the WISC-5. If you go look up the WISC-5 online, Pearson, who is the maker of the WISC-5, was great in the fact that they put all that information online and have some webinars for people along with sample score reports and some explanations and all that stuff. Like I've sat there and watched all of it, every bit of it. I try to like research and find out all of this stuff. So it's good to look at the sample report and see what it says. Normally the sample reports include in it what I mentioned in Sarah's post, and then I got people confused. I'm so sorry, I got y'all confused. But I said CI. So CI is confidence interval. It is a psychological term. And what it means is that on any given day, right, if your child takes this test, their test score should fall within like this range. And so the confidence interval often will dip down below the 25 number for standard score. Well, that means your child is probably having difficulty in that area. Even though they're technically average, on a different day, they could have had a 24, a 23, a 22, you know, whatever the confidence interval says. So those are all things that you should know, right? Like, they don't tell you, but it's important information that you need to have. And it's relevant because it helps point to areas in which your child is struggling. And I think it's worthwhile to then ask for an IEE, right? So just know I do cover a lot of that information in the special education terms to know under, weirdly, a specific learning disability, because that's often how they'll kind of cut children out of qualifying for specific learning disabilities. So I think that was why I kind of brought it up there. But, you know, this is something to know and investigate. Okay, so let's see. So Brianna said they wanted to retest her when she hits 4th grade, but I thought the same and thought a pro would be much better to go again. Yes, and you don't have to wait as long as what they're saying. So do know by law you are allowed to ask for testing as often as once a year. So the school, unless you waive your rights to testing, can wait as long as 3 years, okay? So, but yeah, I mean, if circumstances change or something goes on, you can completely ask for testing a year later. You just can't test more often than a year because a lot of the instruments that they use for these tests, you can't have them more than once a year because it invalidates the scores. There's kind of this learning curve to them, right? And they don't want to worry about a child learning any of this information. So that's why all of that's sort of in place like that. All right, so we addressed V's questions, and hopefully we've answered your questions, V, and if not, again, you feel free to ask for things in the group, like to post stuff in the group. And then Julie said, yes, Michelle, she's very intelligent, and she retains information very well, and has magic superpowers at researching. I do, and thank you, Julie. Yes, so, but thank you for the compliment. So Brianna said, my daughter, 62, so I think she has mild ID. Yes, actually, if her functional IQ is 62, then yes, she would be considered most likely to have a mild intellectual delay. And don't let that concern you. I mean, I did for a long time with my son Joseph, having his IQ kind of settle in at 68. Like, he's now had 3 different functional IQ tests that have said like 68. It's pretty steady, and I'm thinking it'll hold there. And now that he's 11, it most likely is pretty crystallized at 68. So I'm not concerned about that though, and the reason why is what this means is my son may not be on the track to go to college, right? But is that really a problem? I don't think so. But that does mean, though, that we should take time to work on skills like the adaptive skills that I mentioned earlier, right? And making sure that we're working early on the things that your child needs to know in order to be a functional adult. You know, so we need to work on how to get around on public transportation. You need to work on budgeting and just simple math money stuff. You need to work on house cleaning and domestic chores. You need to work on socialization and proper socialization. You need to work on self-regulation. You need to work on self-advocacy. These are all things the school district should be doing, but if they're not, you need to make sure that you're covering these things at home. It's very important because it's not uncommon if you don't fight and advocate for these things from the school, your child may not get them. And then all of a sudden they're older and they're graduating out of high school one way or another, right? And they're not really prepared to be a functional adult and be independent, or at least semi-independent by living in a group home with some minimal supervision. So I think this is part of the reason I pulled my children from public school, because I had Joseph in this lower level class in 3rd grade that they're teaching him like days of the weeks and month of the year and that kind of, you know, stuff. And it's like, no, my son is smarter than that. He understands. He's just a really slow thinker, really slow. But he gets it, so he doesn't need that information. And really, it's not super relevant information because now we have technology, and technology can keep track of all that stuff for you. So what I'm more interested in is, can he function independently? So I have skills for him where literally he is supposed to look up a bus route and decide when he needs to be somewhere, and to make sure that he plans to be there on time, because if you have a job, you can't be late, right? So he has to plan for these transportation. He has to go shopping. He has to know how to look and determine what's a good deal at the grocery store. He needs to be able to make purchases. He needs to be able to count money. He needs to be able to count change back. These are all important things that he needs to do in order to be a functional adult. And I found that, to me, is more important that he learns versus, when was the Magna Carta signed? He's not going to need that in his life. But he does need to know how to wash clothes and fold his clothes and to clean up his house. So those are some of the things that I look for and work on. And then also vocational skills. So don't forget that too. Because for Joseph, his vocational skill, like one of the things he's worked on as his vocational skill, is I was able to retain a teacher to teach him Braille. And so he is partially sighted and he's Brailing. And that's part of what I'm hoping he'll be able to do, that he'll be able to offer Brailing services for people who are trying to take, print material and turn it into Braille, and be able to Braille business cards. So, I've already kind of okay, check one possible vocational avenue for him. Now, what else can we do? So I'm always looking for things. Joseph likes cars. He'll never be able to drive. He's blind in one eye, but he loves cars. So I probably next am going to have him start watching YouTube videos on car repair and engine repair. He loves to watch videos. He'll watch those over and over again until he can tell you how to do these things. So, I have a lot of hope for him. He just needs time to process things. And I think he's going to be a very productive member of society, but, it's going to take a little while, right? Okay. So, what is the name of the test, functional IQ? Okay. So for functional IQ, there's a lot of tests in which they can determine a functional IQ. The one I see most often is the WISC-5. Okay. So that's the one that I tend to see, and they, take all these cognitive domains and then come up with a functional IQ score. So Courtney asks, can I ask about short-term objectives and benchmarks? I was wondering if he is only meeting expectations mid-year, aren't the benchmarks meant to be mastered mid-year, right? Okay, so no, here's what's happened. When IDEA was reauthorized, they took away benchmarking. So benchmarking used to be kind of like mini goals, right? Like you made mini goals for your 1 year goal. Your goals in your IEP are meant to be 1 year goal, like one academic year goal. And so it is okay to turn and ask for or to put in some kind of benchmark or mini goal, but it's not required. So you do need to ask for that. Now, what you should be getting, no matter what, you should be getting progress reports. Are you not getting progress reports? Because you should be getting a progress report on the yearly goals. So you can see, or if you're getting 4 progress reports a year based on the, having 4 grading periods in an academic year, when you get the first one, have they met a quarter of their goal or more? When you get the one in the middle of the year, have they met at least half of their goal or more? If not, then it's time to maybe start being concerned, like, what's going on, and start asking more questions to find out why things aren't being effective. And that's what you want to look at. So let's see. Who does it, school or medical? So for the functional IQ, actually either school or medical can determine a functional IQ. The WISC-5 is done by both. So either way, that can happen. And theoretically, if your child has been assessed for an IEP, they probably have a functional IQ score in their paperwork. If you look through all the tests and test scores, it's probably in there. All right. So this has been a ridiculously long session. I am terribly sorry, but I'm glad that you guys hang on with me. And let me kind of take this last part here, Courtney's question. She said, for example, how can a student be meeting expectations on benchmarks and also be meeting expectations on the same annual goal? Because your benchmark tends to be like, it's related to that yearly goal. It's just a smaller portion of it. So they've broken it down so that, you know, it's like this mini goal inside your big yearly goal. So that's how they do it. And then, like I said, even if they don't have benchmarking, you should be still getting reports, and that should be listed in your IEP. It should tell you how frequently you should be getting reports on the progress of the goals. So if you aren't, that's concerning, and that needs to be addressed. So just be aware of that and keep an eye on them, because it's very important that you make sure your child is making progress on the goals. Because if they aren't, that's a problem. And then that, with the Supreme Court case of Andrew, where it says your child has to be making more than de minimis, which means you have to be making more than the minimum. And so if that's not happening, then you can go, hey, Supreme Court said my child should be making more progress than the minimum. They're not doing that, you know? And so we need to go back and kind of reassess what's going on. All right. So I was just saying, I'll look into it. Thank you so much. You're life-saving. Well, thank you. Thank you for hanging in with me this evening. Latanya is saying, thank you so much. You're awesome. Well, thank you. You are too. Thank you for tuning in, right? This would be very boring if I spent the entire time talking to myself. So thank you very much for joining me. It is getting late, later on my end. It's almost 9. So hopefully you guys are all on the mid coast or west coast with me and aren't on the east coast staying up extremely late watching. Next week, YouTube, hopefully. Sorry about the confusion. I did not know there would be a 24-hour delay for me to have a live presentation when I confirmed my account. So they wouldn't let me use my phone number. Apparently my son has used my phone number on one too many YouTube accounts, and I can't use it on another one. Little did I know, right? All right. So anyways, again, thank you so much for this evening, and I will talk to you again next week. And again, if there's any other questions that you have, please make sure you post them into the group. I will try to get to them as soon as I can. I am exceptionally busy at the moment, so it may be until the evening hours before I get around to them, but I will definitely make sure that I get around to answering any of your posts in the group. All right. Thank you so much. Have a good night. Bye.